Hello, welcome back to Java for Beginners series. In this video, we're going to discuss variables. This is going to be video number 1 out of 2-part series of videos to introduce variables to us as beginners. So join me. For this part of the course, we're going to talk about variables. What are variables? Variables are places in memory where you store data. So we're going to talk about data types, the types of data that you can store in those variable memory locations. And we're going to talk about mathematical operations that you can perform on numeric data types or numeric variables. So let's get started. So I'm going to begin by defining a variable here called a, and I'm going to give it a value 10. So what are we doing here? We're defining a variable. The name of the variable is a. The type of the variable is int, which stands for integer, and we're giving it a value of 10. Now, programming languages are either strongly typed or weakly typed. Java is strongly typed. What does that mean? It means that the value that you assign to the variable has to be consistent with its data type, integer. For more, look up strongly versus weakly typed programming languages. But for all we need right now is to know that if you define an integer, then you need to give an integer or an integer compatible, we'll speak about that later, value to the variable or the memory location that you're creating. So we're creating a memory location called a, which has the value 10 stored inside it. We can change that and we can say a equals 20. So we've changed our mind about a. And now I can come here and I could print out a. And if I hit run, I'm going to get 20 printed. Why? Because 20 is the new value. What if I added a print statement before I changed the value? Here, and I print a beforehand. What's going to happen? I get 10 and then I get 20. So you see, as if this line over here, the value of a was 10. So the printed value is 10. And now the value changed to 20. So the printed value will be 20. Does that make sense? Congratulations. You've just defined and used your first Java variable. Now, more on this variable, right? Its type integer, its name is a, and its value is 10. I want to break that operation down into 2 operations. There are actually 2 operations in one statement, and I want to make them 2 operations in 2 statements. What do I mean? So int a is a statement, or can be a statement, which is just defining the variable. Like saying, I'm declaring that there's going to be a variable of type integer called a. Make sense? Now, the second operation would be the assigning of a value to that variable. Make sense? And if I go and print that variable, I'm going to get 10 printed. Perfect. What happens if you try to print before you give it a value? What's going to happen? I see an error here. Variable a might not have been initialized. Let's run it anyways and see what happens. Exactly. And that is one of the advantages of using an IDE, is that you get these like intelligent warnings so that without even having to run your code, you know that there's something wrong with it. And here, when we run the code, we get that the variable may have not been initialized. So the Java language is trying to print the value of a, but a has no value. So how are you going to print a when it has no value? All right, so let's change the name of the variable. How do we do that? I'm going to click here. I'm going to delete a and just give it a name like number. Now, what happens if I try to run the application? I'm going to get an error. Cannot find symbol variable a in class main. Well, we've changed the name here, but we're trying to print the old name. So it's trying to look for a variable named a. However, it doesn't find the symbol, which is in this case the variable a, because it's not been defined or declared. We're declaring number, so we might as well change that here to number and change that assignment to number equals, right? And we kind of established that it's kind of pointless to try to print the value of number before you give it a value. So I'm going to remove that. We're going to replace this one with, let me just clean up. And then let's run the application again. All right, we get 10. So what if you want to change the name to something else? Well, in IntelliJ, there's a very handy shortcut. You can go Shift and F6, and you can hit it once or twice, and it can bring out a dialog. So you can say, my number, and it will modify the name of your variable all over the place, wherever you have it mentioned. We've created and named our very first Java variable. Congratulations. Now we want to talk about variable names. So there are a few rules that we have to follow when we're naming a variable. Starting with rule number 1, which is you're allowed to use letters, whether it be in uppercase or lowercase, digits, underscores, or dollar signs. And for digits, you're not allowed to use digits as the first character in the name of your variable. In fact, you can only start it with a letter, underscore, or a dollar sign. So no digits. You cannot have any other special characters like spaces or like, I don't know, a hashtag sign. You're not allowed to have any of that. No Java keywords. What is a keyword? Do you know like how we had public static void main? So public static void are keywords. Class is a keyword, etc. So these are special words that are reserved for a special function in the Java language. So if you really are naming a variable, you want to avoid these keywords because they serve a specific function, and you're really just confusing the compiler if you use them as a variable name. Variable names are case sensitive. So like a number, like all caps or lower caps, would be like, let me show you. Let me jump in the code and show you what I'm talking about. All right, so to our last point, I'm going to define int a and int a. It's the same character really, but one is uppercase and one is lowercase, but they're treated as different variables. And I'll show you why. If you print a and then you print a, and let's give them values. So this one will be 10 or 1, let's say, and this one will be 2. I'm going to comment this out. So command and / so that it doesn't throw a build error when I'm trying to run the application. So I get 1 and 2. So they're treated as completely different variables. So that's rule number 4. Rule number 1 was that you can only have letters, numbers, except for the first digit, sorry, the first character. And the special characters that you can have are underscore and dollar sign. So let's try these out. First of all, I'm going to try to define a number variable. That's a good variable because it's just letters. I can have uppercase letters in it. I can have a dollar sign in it. I can have a dollar sign at the beginning in it. And still, if I print that, I'm going to comment this out. I'm going to get the value 1 being printed, which is the value assigned to it. I'm going to comment these out as well. I can start it with an underscore as well and run that. Well, I've modified it here, but I didn't modify the name over here. So I'll run it again and I get 1. Now, if I put a number here, like in the middle, that's fine. Change the name over there and hit run. It's all good. Now, if I try to put a name at the a number at the beginning, now that's gonna be an issue. So let's not do that. Gonna undo. Okay. Now the last rule that we had is we cannot have a keyword. So such as public class, public static void. So if I try to use void as a name and hit run, yeah, it's going to say this is not a statement. So, I mean, what it's basically saying is I'm expecting a valid variable name here, and you're giving me an invalid variable name. So this is not a statement that I can understand. So that is all to know about legal variable names for now. Now let's have a look at this. Does that make any sense to you? Doesn't make sense to me. It's just a bunch of gibberish. So it is a legal name, as in if you hit run, the compiler doesn't complain, the JVM doesn't complain, but it's kind of a ridiculous name. So when you're developing code and you're building software that maybe somebody else will look at that code and, make changes to it, you're working within a team, you kind of want to have to agree on basic rules, conventions, let's call them, for a good variable name. Not a legal variable name. All names should be legal, otherwise your program is not going to work. What we're talking about is a good variable name, a variable name that follows a convention. Now, this convention that we're going to talk about for the Java language is called the camel case convention. What is the camel case convention? Now, do you remember earlier we defined int my number equals 10, right? Now, what is the problem? What if my number that is very special and I would like you to initialize it with 10? Okay, this is a ridiculous statement, but you get my point now. I can't read this. It's very unreadable. So what we can do instead is use camel case. So camel case is when you have the first word being all lowercase, and then any subsequent words will have its first letter as uppercase, and the rest is lowercase. So what do we change here? Well, the first word has to be all lowercase, then the next word, and the next word, and the next word will change the first letter to be uppercase. So I'm going to remove that N. I'm going to add an uppercase N. And now suddenly this is very readable, right? My number. We've created this distinction. All right, so let's sum up what we've learned about variable naming convention. We're going to use camel case for variables. Camel case is when you have the first word lowercase, and then each additional word will start with a capital letter. And then these are some examples. You want to make sure that your names are descriptive. Like if you look at the variable name A, what do you, A equals 10, what is that? Nobody knows. Who knows? Or X. You want to use something like age. If you say age equals 10, oh yeah, I know, it's a person, or like a being, could be like a dog that is 10 years of age. So that is something that you can understand, or total score, etc., etc. So that makes the code easier to understand. So because it's not really just enough to write code that works, you want to write code that works and is maintainable. So you could give it to somebody else and they can figure out what the code is actually doing by reading the code. So if they read int x equals something, they're not going to have a slight clue to like, what did you mean when you said int x when you were writing the code, I don't know, 5 years ago? You probably wouldn't remember yourself. So you want to be descriptive and you want to be consistent and you want to be a good software developer, I guess. All right, so let's sum up what we've done so far. We've learned about creating a variable, declaring it, giving it a value, printing it, changing the value, valid names for variables in Java, and valid names for variables in Java that follow a naming convention, camel case naming convention. Now, we can go on now to learning about other data types aside from int. But before we do that, I have one last topic that I want to talk about. The thing I want to talk about is defining constants. So what we've defined here is a variable of type int. Int is a Java keyword, which is a data type. If I have final before int, then this turns my number into a constant. So what does that mean? It means that we can still print it. So I'll get 10 when I print it. But if I try to change the value of it, say my number equals 11, well, I'm going to get the compiler saying that you cannot assign a value to a final variable, as in like a constant variable. Final as in this is the final value that is going to be stored inside that variable or that memory location during the lifetime of that memory location. So I'm not able to assign any new values to it. Thank you for watching the video. I hope you found it useful. This video represents the foundation for the next video, which is part 2 on variables, where we're going to discuss primitive data types and be able to do more things with the Java language. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.